What a great group. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Greg Riedman. I'm president of the Charles River Regional Chamber. We want to welcome you today to the Homewood Suites and Inn here at Arsenal Yards. Pleased to have really a great crowd we've got. And I'm not going to mention the names because I don't want to free anybody, but we have state senators here, we have state reps, we have people from their offices, we've got city councilors, we have some select board members representing all four communities and people in the planning department, and a lot of great business folks in the room. So we're really delighted to have you all. My special thanks to Newton Wellesley Hospital for sponsoring our program today, and for the Secretary for joining us, and for all of you for joining us. Monica Tibbits-Nutt is Secretary and CEO of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And it's got to be one of the hardest jobs in state government. Listen to what that means in terms of being what she's responsible for. 4 divisions of MassDOT: highway, rail, transit, registry of motor vehicles, aeronautics, and also serves on the Massport MBTA Board of Directors, which means it's like planes, trains, automobiles, sidewalks, streets, side traffic lights, buses, bike lanes, and everything else that moves, and we know what a big challenge that is. But we're really delighted that we have this person with us today to talk about the administration's plans in that area and what she's done. And prior to working as secretary, she was the undersecretary of MassDOT. She served on the MassDOT Board of Directors, vice chair, fiscal management, and control board that oversaw the MBTA. But to us, Secretary Tibbits-Nutt is Monica, who we knew as a chamber member for many years when she led the 128 Business Council Transportation Management Agency, and we always look to her for insights and advice about our region's transportation challenges. That's the folks that run the grid around in many of our communities, take many of our workers to their office spots even today. So welcome, Secretary. We're really delighted to have you. You're going to talk for a little while and then answer some questions, which would be great. We really appreciate that. I did want to say that as an organization representing 4 chamber communities along the Mass Pike, that we've been paying tolls for 72 years, and we would be perfectly delighted with tolls on the border or elsewhere. So I just felt like I needed to get that in now, and we'll leave the rest for questions later. But Secretary, please give a big welcome to Secretary Monica Tibbits-Nutt.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do feel like I can't go anywhere without the tolling comment, so I do appreciate that. I also pay tolls every single day. Well, thank you all for having me here. I've known most of you for a very, very long time, so it is really, really nice to be able to come back in a new capacity and talk a little bit about what this administration is up to. So one of the things I spend a lot of time talking about is housing and economic development. I probably talk about housing more than I talk about transportation. As most of you know, you live and work in communities that are just crippled by the congestion on our roadways. And it is actually getting worse. I think people talk a lot about it as if, is this a perception thing? No, it is actually getting worse. And May has been one of the worst months for our traffic congestion in a very, very long time. And it's the kind of thing where people ask me, okay, what is causing this? We don't know, actually. We look at data, we look at crash data, we look at traffic counts, and at this point, I think the best guess we have is people are causing a lot of traffic accidents and people don't live anywhere near where they work. And so that's the reason I talk a lot about housing. I can't ease congestion. There are only so many tools we have, and most of them are punitive. You can charge more tolls within the Commonwealth. You can charge for congestion pricing. You can make it insanely expensive for people to drive, but it doesn't actually solve the central problem of how do you get people to where they need to go. And for us, we don't add capacity anymore. This is something we talk a lot about. We don't add capacity to our roadways anymore in Massachusetts. We improve our roadways, we make them safer, but we're not adding any lanes, although adding lanes actually doesn't help with congestion. That's something a lot of people really don't understand. But we don't have a lot of tools. And so for us, it's getting people on public transit. And as you all know, the general manager and his team have done an unbelievable job in repairing the rail and basically rebuilding a system that's well over 100 years old. But it takes time. And I think the other thing is, even with all of that, for communities out here, you don't have a lot of transit options. You know, Newton has the Green Line, many of the communities have the commuter rail, you have bus lines, but for a lot of people, it just doesn't work. It doesn't time right, it isn't convenient, and for a lot of commuter rail riders, it's insanely expensive. I live very close to 2 commuter rail stations. I've actually never gone to those commuter rail stations, nor have I ever used the commuter rail from where I live, because it's $400 a month. And, you know, I'm a public servant, and we're actually paid very well in comparison to a lot of the residents of the Commonwealth. But we don't make enough to be able to use transit. And I think that is really indicative of the central problem. So what are we trying to do to help this? We are really working very hard to increase housing. We talk a lot about the MBTA Communities Act, which is very, very controversial in a lot of communities. There are many communities that have voted to not put in more housing. They all have many different reasons for this. And I'm not going to sit here and judge those reasons because I don't live in those communities. So I don't know what was behind the votes that a lot of them have taken. But the thing I do know is unless we get housing, and I'm talking affordable housing, and when I say affordable housing, a lot of people say, okay, so you're talking about low-income families. No, I'm talking about housing that anyone can afford. And that really is the full spectrum of housing. No one can afford to live here. And the thing that Secretary Howe, our Secretary of Economic Development, is constantly saying is now we're losing people. It used to be that conversation around, okay, if you live in 128, you work in 128, you're priced out of that, okay, you'll go to 495. Okay, you can't do that, now you'll go to the South Shore. Now it's you go to a different state. And it's not just impacting our residents, it's impacting our businesses. And that's when we start to get very, very worried. The budget we put forward this year is a very, very tight budget. And that's the proposed budget from this administration. The House budget is also very tight. And the thing is, it's because we are not bringing in enough revenues. The state is not making the amount of money that we used to make. So this is just compounding that problem. And so as a DOT, what are we supposed to do with this? And for us, it is really looking at what changes do we need to make for the Department of Transportation, for the MBTA, for all of our different divisions that Greg talked about. We cover every possible way that you can move. MassDOT's gonna be 15 years old this year, which a lot of people don't know. We're actually not that old. 15 years ago, basically you took a bunch of agencies, crammed them all together, put us all in one building, and we're just like, okay, figure it out. So we've spent 15 years trying to figure it out. And in this 15-year anniversary, what we're looking at is, who are we? What do we need to be? How do we need to work? And how in the world are we going to pay for all the things that we know we need to do? You know, I've spent a lot of time talking about different funding mechanisms. That is a very controversial thing to talk about, but we have to talk about it. And whether people think my idea is crappy, that's fine, but we need ideas. We need any ideas because we've used everything we have and those tools aren't working anymore. So for MassDOT, it is how do we pay for it, but it is also at the same time, what system do we actually need? The system we have now is not enough for most residents. It just isn't. So for us, we are putting together the plan, okay, what is gonna be enough? And this is our Beyond Mobility Plan. This is looking out to 2050 for every municipality in the Commonwealth, whether you are being served by the MBTA, whether you're being served by one of our 15 regional transit authorities, whether you're being served by a service like the Transportation Management Associations provide. What does this system need to look like to address the population now, but also address the issues that we're seeing and try and meet where the places that housing are being built? There are many communities that are building housing, and I think that that's something we don't actually talk enough about. There are many communities that are not subject to the MBTA Communities Act that are building housing. We have cities like Gardner, which a lot of people don't even know where Gardner is. And Gardner built 512 units of housing last year. They don't have MBTA service at all, and they built 512 units. You have places like Palmer, that privately one family is rebuilding the train station that closed in the 70s, and they're building housing for no other reason than they want better communities. That's what we need. And I think for us, that's what we're looking at. This plan looks at 6 different things. Safety. Talk a lot about safety. Any of you that are on our roadways, you can see people can't drive. We're also talking about, they just can't. I was trying to be very blunt on this. I think in the last 48 hours of driving, I've seen 6 accidents. Yeah, it's just, as you can tell, this bothers me a lot. And I can see like Michael and anyone that works with you, like, here comes a story. So during the pandemic, people just were driving like crazy, driving like speedways. I use Route 2, which for most people, it's 45 miles per hour and then 55, not 75 or 85. And anyone that commutes in the morning, here's what you see. Texting. I see people eating cereal, which is a big thing, and I think it is literally the exact same individual every single morning. We have the person that shaves every single morning. It's electric shaver, so seems effective. We have people applying all sorts of facial products. And then you have people in these kind of, well, what they consider autonomous vehicles. They're not actually autonomous vehicles, but that's kind of how they're operating. And they're just kind of doing whatever, and the car's just driving. This is the stuff that we are seeing every single day. So while we're dealing with congestion, we're also dealing with trying to keep everyone alive on our roadways. And that is very, very difficult. It is incredibly difficult. And at the same time, we're talking about clean transportation. We all understand that climate change is happening. It is incredibly hot most of the time. The rainstorms we're getting make those snowstorms of 2015 seem like a dream scenario at this point, which I cannot believe that I am saying. We are dealing with rainstorms that are crippling our communities. Leominster. Leominster was borderline biblical in how bad that rainstorm was. And my family, we were in the middle of that rainstorm as it is happening, crossing over a rail embankment that washed out less than 10 minutes after we crossed over it. And those houses flooded almost instantaneously. And we're seeing more of these. Greenfield was hit with a very similar situation, and I guarantee you we are going to continue to see that all summer. And people don't realize when we talk about funding transportation how expensive it is to clean up those storms. Leominster cost us $28 million. Yes, $28 million that we didn't have, but we had obviously no choice but to rebuild that community. And we did it in 48 hours. It's the other thing about MassDOT, we're literally the world's best construction company. We are very good at rebuilding pretty much anything. But I think it speaks to the things that no one thought about. Most of our plans are decades old. The newest ones are from 2013. That was a whole different world. We talk about the pandemic, which has just genuinely changed the way people move, but we never considered the weather. We never considered the fact that companies are going virtual in a lot of circumstances, or companies have to move to further locations to be able to afford that rent. Everything is different, and we have to be able to respond to that. So the other part of what we're doing is we're doing a strategic business plan, which apparently not a lot of departments of transportation do, but we know the way we do business is not what we need. It's not what our residents need, and we actually listen to a lot of what they say. So we have to figure out, okay, what do we do, and how do we pay it, and is this what the communities need? And this goes to the cooperation with our communities. We spend a lot of time in our communities. We are doing these, what we call district days, where we basically take the entire Department of Transportation, all the administrators of our divisions, we go out to a district. We have 6 districts in the Commonwealth. We break them up by highways. We go out to these communities and we talk to them. We talk to the elected officials. We talk to just residents. We talk to our employees and see, okay, what do you actually need? These projects look very, very different on the ground than what I see. Normally, I just see a plan, I see a contract, usually a very long contract, but that doesn't show me what that project actually looks like or the impact. And for a lot of these municipalities, they haven't seen us in a very, very long time. A lot of people talk about the MBTA. They serve 177 municipalities. We have 351. And a lot of the times, especially central Massachusetts, western Massachusetts, no one really talks about them unless it's a snowstorm. The way people think about western Massachusetts is Maple, you can go hiking, and you can go to Tanglewood. Central Massachusetts is, well, where a lot of the flooding happens, and, well, where I live, which I always like to say, and a lot of gateway cities that are doing really amazing things. But the inner core is also struggling because they are pushing everyone out because the housing stock just isn't there. So how do we help the municipalities beyond going out there and talking to them? Because that's great, but that doesn't actually do anything. Chapter 90. Anyone from municipality in here, you know, Chapter 90, that is the thing. That is what repairs roads, that's what repairs that's everything. Chapter 90 is kind of the allowance for the municipalities. And we've increased it by $100 million. But the other thing about Chapter 90 is we make it very difficult for you to get that money. So we can increase it. We could increase it by $500 million, but it still doesn't make it any easier. And so what we're doing is we're looking at Chapter 90 reform. Let's just make it easier for the communities to get reimbursed. One of the things that people talk about is just like the waste, fraud, and abuse of the municipalities. And occasionally someone will be like, yes, we need to buy something wild, like, you know, snow dragon that basically shoots fire to get rid of ice. Super cool. Absolutely awesome. Insanely expensive, and depending on where you live, and especially with this climate, probably not the best use of funds, but that really shouldn't be the reason that we make it difficult for people to just fix potholes and get the money they need to actually pay for it. One of the other things we're doing is we're making grants a lot easier. A lot of the people in here apply for grants through DOT, and it's a wild ride. Just in our highway division, we have 150 grants, just in one division, and we have 4 of them. And that's not even including the MBTA and their grants. It's insane. So what we thought is like, you know what, let's make this easy. Let's make it like if you went to any other company and were like, let me give you money so I can get money from you. And we created what we're calling Grant Central. It's very revolutionary for us. You should really check it out. Basically, you just go to one site, you enter, here's the thing I want. I need a snow dragon. And then it's going to tell you through AI, which we're using a lot of, okay, here's all the grants that you could potentially buy a snow dragon through. Here's how you apply. And then you can actually track your application. I almost cried. We had a senior staff meeting in which this was presented. I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And now we're putting all 150, and we're going to keep adding hundreds and hundreds of grants just to make it to where organizations can actually get money from us. Because the horrible, sad, sad story is a lot of the time, the money isn't spent. And so it just sits. And then we have to give it back, or we have to give it to one of our other secretariats, which they're very, very important, but I want all my money. And that's really sad because we know that there are needs, but we also know that we were in the impediment. So we're trying to make that easier. But then we have the massive projects, which a lot of people want to talk about. Cape Cod bridges, massive, super expensive. They're going to get replaced. It's fine. How we pay for it, we're still like 1 million or 1 billion short, but it'll be fine. And it'll be totally fine. Here's the thing though, and I just want to be very honest, we have no choice but to fix them. They're going to get fixed. The Army Corps has been a fantastic partner in this. It is going to be amazing. Just trust me. Bridges are going to be awesome. But then we have other projects. Alston Multimodal, which is a project some of you know has been out there for 20 plus years. I have worked on this project from basically 3 different roles. That's how long this thing has been out there. But then we actually got money for it. $335 million that no one in the country ever thought we were going to get for this project. And the project is huge. And people talk about it's like, well, is it just transforming Boston and Cambridge? Actually, it's really not. One of the things we've been talking about is West-East Rail. And it is West-East. It is not East-West. It is West-East Rail, where we're actually connecting from Springfield all the way in. We can't do that if we don't actually do the Alston project. And it is insanely expensive. It really is. But for all of us using I-90, it is finally going to straighten that thing out. It's going to straighten it out so you're not doing 7 different curves just to get to Storrow, which is a whole other thing. We won't talk about that today. But the other big thing that people don't talk about is it's straightening I-90, but it's actually connecting a community. For any of you who have been to Alston Brighton, you can't see the river. You can't get to the river at all. So this is a community that has been predominantly affordable for a very long time, not just for students, but many families, and especially families of color, can't get to the river. Students on the other side from Harvard can totally get to the river, but they can't. So what we're doing, we just thought, let's reconnect them and actually get them to the river. And that's what we're doing. We're finally breaking down those barriers. We're creating a space where you can actually walk. which is what we're trying to do throughout the Commonwealth. Make it to where you can actually get to all the features independent of what zip code you live in. And it does. It takes a lot of money to do this. But it's money that has been needed to be spent for decades. I mean, quite honestly, generations. I spent a lot of time talking to former secretaries. That's the thing about former secretaries of DOT. No one ever leaves. They just retire and then kind of serve as the mentor for all of us. And Fred Salvucci is probably, I always talk about Fred. He is epic. He is hands down the best secretary ever that Massachusetts has had. But one of the things people don't know, he's also really the nicest person you will ever meet. I could text Fred right now. Any question on transportation, he will get back to me probably within 90 seconds. That's how good he is, but it also points out how long these projects have been there, just sitting and waiting for the funding to actually do them. And finally, we're there. Now the thing that everyone always wants to talk about, and I know the questions are going to be around the MBTA. I talked about the rail. They're fixing it at a pace that no one has ever seen. But the other thing is they're looking at the stations. Many of you know how inaccessible some of the stations are. And actually, the stations along the commuter rail are some of the most inaccessible across the entire system. And I mean, even if you have mobility, they're difficult to get to. They're very difficult, and sometimes it can be borderline dangerous if you have any mobility issues at all. So what the T is doing is finally tackling this, taking on the design. Newtonville is one of the first ones that is going to be done. They're working on the designs right now, and then they're just going to go station to station to station. Other thing that really impacts this area, better bus. This plan has been, I think I voted on this plan 10 years ago at this point, and it's evolved. It was ready. It was so ready in 2020, and then everything changed. And so now they're having to go back and look at this and figure out, okay, are these the right lines? And a lot of that is working with this community and working with the stakeholders, the businesses, the residents to figure out, is this still the right way to do this? This is going to be a continued debate. I think we probably have at least 4 more months of trying to figure out if this is right. It will go in phases, but it is going to take a little bit of time because those routes are not the same that they used to be. They just aren't. And then I think when we talk about expansion, which is something everyone wants to talk about, while we're rebuilding all of this stuff, we do need to think about how do you better connect it. West-East Rail is one really big thing, but it's also looking at the commuter rail and looking at the pricing of the commuter rail. It is insanely expensive. Insanely expensive. Basically, unless, I mean, honestly, even if you do live in the inner core, it's actually still quite expensive. But a lot of that is how the T gets revenue, is the cost of that. And that's something a lot of people don't talk about. You lower those prices, you take away tens of millions of dollars from the T. So then how do we make that up so they can actually do that? The low-income fare was a really, really big first step. It's something that no one ever thought was going to happen. For many of you, you know this has been a passion of mine for 10 years. I've served on so many boards trying to get low-income fares through. We were so close so many times, and we finally got it. And I think anyone that was in the room the day we finally got to take the vote, it was hands down the greatest day of my entire career, and it was for a lot of us. And it was actually a very emotional moment when I finally got to say yes. And one of the things we did is we had community groups come after that, because I mean, the community groups have been fighting a very long time for the low-income fare, especially the senior groups. And one of the things, a woman took me aside, she was like, you've been fighting for 10 years? She's like, I've been fighting for 54. 54 years. That is how long so much of this has taken, and now we can't wait any longer. So it is going to take a lot of partnership from all of you. I always say, I don't know what your communities need. I don't. I can have an educated guess sometimes, but also sometimes we're just wrong. And especially when it comes to the services out in the communities. So whether it's going through and fixing bus stops, whether it is going through and making sure the sidewalks are accessible so you can actually get to the bus stop, that's the stuff that we're focused on right now. We have massive projects, but we also have very tiny details that seem tiny to us, but can make all the difference to one resident or even one street. So we have a lot of plans, we have a lot of challenges, but I will say this, we're up for it. As you can tell, people have a lot of feelings. They have a lot of feelings about the things that we say about transportation. And I think that can be very difficult in these roles. It can be very difficult for elected officials. But if you try and take the positive side of it, it does mean that people understand that there's a problem and they understand that this is going to be tough. 2024 is going to be an amazing year for transportation, but it is going to be tough. The next 5 to 10 years are going to be really tough. We have so much to do, so much, but so much will change. We are electrifying the fleet. We're electrifying them hundreds of buses at a time. We will electrify the trains. That's probably going to take 10 plus years. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the people working on those projects, we will be retired by the time we're done, but it will be finished. So our children can enjoy it. Because I think we always talk about youth are the future. I think for me, it is, I have a daughter, because most of you know her, and many of us have children. Almost all of us actually have children at DOT. And the thing we talk about is we know how hard it is now. We know the struggle for us to be able to afford homes, to be able to live in Massachusetts, to be able to sacrifice the time to do these jobs. But it is absolutely worth it, because I'm telling you, 15 years from now, it is just going to be a beautiful system. It is. We are going to have thousands of units of housing. It's going to be a place where young people can stay, but also young people can come home. And that is what makes all of this worth it. In the times where these jobs, like I said, are very, very tough, but it is. Every single day we do something better. Every single day we make someone's life better. And this administration is focused on that. We're putting the money behind not just the policies, but quite honestly, the ethics by which we actually want to conduct. So thank you all for letting me come in today and give you an overview of what we're doing, but hopefully also give you hope that we're going to get there. And I know there's going to be some questions, and I'm going to answer them to the best of my ability. So if it's okay, I'm just going to open it up, and I'm just going to
just introduce themselves, tell us where you're from and who you represent, and go for it.
Yes.
So I'm Susan Albright. I'm a city councilor in Municipal. And I have so many questions I could ask, but first of all, I have to say it's wonderful to see you there instead of, the consultant and all those special permit projects that you were on. So it's great to have you as the head of the MBTA.
Thank you.
But I think I'll ask my question about the most local to me. We looked in the 5-year CIP, and you mentioned Newtonville. Mm-hmm. The only money in the 5-year CIP is for design.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Are you going to actually build it or just design it? And in the next 5 years?
We're going to design it, but we can't put it in the SIP until the design is actually finished.
So it doesn't mean that we're not going to move ahead once the design is created?
Oh no, once the design is, we're doing it. No, 100%. Yes, but we have to finish the design, but we're not going to do the design and not actually finish it. And we know that it's not just Newtonville. I know that you have 3 other stations. Yes, we do. But yes, it's going to get built.
All right. I won't ask my other questions, but thank you very much.
Yes.
Hi, Erica Madison with my consulting practice. It's great to see you in this role. Thank you for your remarks. I've been a transportation advocate for many years, and I like to think that a system is only as good as the people who are part of that system, and they are only as good as the support that they receive. So it's been really concerning to me that our railroad workers have gone a couple of years without a contract, and they still don't have paid sick time. So when we think about crashes, when we think about accidents, when we think about safety, and of course that is paramount, we should want people to be going to work when they feel well and be going and taking care of themselves when they do not feel well, and not forcing themselves to go to work or take vacation time when they're not well. So could you speak a little bit to that and your vision for moving forward and improving the worker conditions?
So this one's complicated. These are actually not our employees. And that's the really difficult part of this. And so for anyone that doesn't know, basically the workers of Keolis, that is the contractor that provides our commuter rail They do not have sick time the same way that everyone else in the Commonwealth does by law. Yes. And so what Keolis is doing right now is they are negotiating, and they are getting very, very close to coming to an agreement on what that needs to look like. But yes, they will be getting sick time. That I can guarantee you. Yes.
Shelley Martin, I'm the new Director of Transportation Planning for the City of Newton. You mentioned electrification of the state fleet. One thing we struggle with in Newton is electrification of our school buses. And we could really use some state help finding land such that we can have the infrastructure we need to store buses, to electrify, and to make buses a grid asset. With the high value of land, we aren't finding a permanent place in Newton. We rent our bus lots, we rent our van lots, we're in other communities storing our buses. So some help finding a new space along the highway, already paved, MassDOT owned parking lot, something like that would be a huge help. I'm sure Newton isn't alone in needing this kind of assistance from the state. Thank you.
You aren't. And we've been getting this request. So what we're doing right now is we have the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. That's putting EV chargers along all of our federal roadways, but we're also doing the Mass Pike. But as part of that, we're also looking at all of the sites throughout the Commonwealth, whether DOT owns it, whether another secretariat owns it, and how we can put EV charging infrastructure that isn't just going to be for cars, but that we can also do school buses and regional transit buses. So we're working with Eversource and National Grid to figure out where we can put them. But this is something that we're working very hard to actually be able to put that in place so that you aren't having to try and figure out as a municipality, okay, where can we put this on our land? Okay, if we can't, can we buy this land? Because it is insanely expensive. And so we are trying to get the best rate we can by just doing it in bulk. So I'd probably say within the next 18 months, you will see more movement on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that you love talking about additional tolls, one of your favorite new topics. The tolls, I'd be curious, there's a fact, there's a question of what do the tolls from the Mass Pike generate for the Commonwealth per year? I assume you know that number, but you've also probably studied what if we put the tolls, since I don't think those tolls coming in from the west are ever going to go away. The state's addicted to the money, and I think we can understand that, no matter how frustrated Mr. Reedman might be about the injustice of that. If they were tolling from the south and from the north, you probably have the data as to what that would generate. Could you tell us those three numbers, the data from the north and the south, if they were to be tolled, and what is the state getting from the tolls from the west?
So I actually don't have those numbers, but I will tell you kind of the quirky thing about the tolls. The state doesn't really get the tolls. What we get from that toll money is we can put it back into that roadway. We can't use that toll money for anything else. It can only be put back into that roadway. So if we were to increase tolls in Massachusetts, which we will absolutely not do, or add any additional tolls within the Commonwealth, which we will absolutely not do, we would need legislation to change how we use that toll money. So it is very difficult, and this is a frustration I think that has existed for a very long time. But with that said, those roadways need a shocking amount of investment. And if we didn't have those tolls going towards that, we would have to be battling the SIP every single cycle to be able to actually improve those. So that is the best answer I can give within the Commonwealth. Anything outside of that, I can't give you numbers on.
Ann McKinnon, Jamaica Plain. I'd like to make a big pitch for massive increase in the MassWorks grant program. I've worked with community groups in Roxbury, and we're building affordable housing, and the city makes us pay for signals and sewer and roadway improvements, and it can make or break a project. MassWorks is a really valuable project to fund infrastructure related to housing development and commercial development. And it's been, in my opinion, woefully underfunded, and it hangs projects up because you've got to figure out how you're going to finance the signal improvement or what have you. And I think just a really, really significant boost in that program would make a huge difference in housing construction.
So all of our programs are looking at that and actually increasing, and there is about $4.1 billion in a housing bond bill to try and increase the amount of money that we can give through all of those programs. But MassWorks is one that I do agree is very underfunded and has been for a very long time, and is probably one of the best programs we have to actually increase housing, which is why this housing bond bill means a lot to us right now. Now we just actually have to get it through.
Hi, thank you. Lauren Lele from Healey-Driscoll. I just have a question about, is there any state or example that you look to that you feel like is doing this work really well, that you would like to get to that same type of position that they have?
Depends on what you're asking about. I would say, California just does electrification better than anyone on the planet, quite honestly. But they're also so much bigger and have so much more money. So I would say for train electrification, them, and Quebec is actually doing really interesting stuff with hydrogen trains. That's really cool. And that's something actually we are looking at to see if that is a potential alternative to that. I would say for funding transportation, the Pacific Northwest just does it a lot better than we do. As far as expanding services and increasing the frequency, I would probably say Chicago Transit Authority is doing a really nice job. As far as building new subway lines, Austin, Texas. And then I think with just the cost of services, I think Transport for London kicks our butt pretty consistently on that. And then also Paris, which basically provides free transit throughout the entire country of France, is also unbelievable. Yes, I think those are it. Oh wait, no, bus service. Forgot that one. Bus service, Washington actually does a really, really nice job, and they've actually had free fares for a very, very long time. And their bus service is really nice. Their buses are fantastic. They're really beautiful. And they also have really awesome bus stops. As you can tell, I think a lot about this.
Washington City or Washington State?
Washington State. Oh yeah, DC, they're going through it right now. They're in a really rough spot, actually probably rougher than we are, unfortunately.
Hi, Marcy Wilbur with Griffith Properties. You started out this conversation about safety and traffic. Could you talk a little bit about bike lanes? Because bike lanes, obviously, they start in the city, and you have two problems with the bikers. The path just ends, and then the bikers don't follow the rules of the road, so they might go the wrong way when everyone else is going the right way. And then as they come out into the suburbs, there's one going up near our house, and I was on one of the calls with MassDOT as they were building it, and the concern of the neighbors was they're trying to put 10 pounds of sausage into a 5-pound bag on the street, and then all of a sudden the bike path just ends. So it's safety concerns for the bikers, but as well as the drivers, and the comment back from the MassDOT was, well, we have to do it. And what about safety? It was like, well, we have to do it. So.
This one's, and it's very fitting, Bike Week. This one's really tough. So I'm going to start with, we're kind of going to work our way down. So we're doing a lot of shared use paths right now. We just cut a ribbon yesterday in Westfield for one of these. We're going to spend, I think we're building about 25 miles this year to try and make the connections between the bike paths. When you're talking within the communities, this one's tough. The Complete Streets program has done a really, really great job in building that infrastructure, doing road diets where we're just trying to make it safer for all of the users. But this one's really difficult because you have drivers who are not doing what they need to do, and you have cyclists that are not doing what they need to do. And when you combine those two things, it creates a lot of issues. The way our design guides are, and this is from the federal government down, we don't have a lot of flexibility in how we design these. With that said, we are looking at the design guidelines right now, because the other thing that people don't, unless you are in this community, a lot of people don't know about, we're also having a significant amount of issues with cyclists and pedestrians, because we have a lot of these cycle tracks where people are just blowing through there, and then they hit a crosswalk across from a hospital or across from a senior center. And they're in a situation where they're going fast enough that they can actually kill someone. And we don't spend a lot of time talking about that. So what we're doing now is working with the cycling community to look, should we put in traffic lights for that? Should we put in basically kind of barriers that you have to kind of ride through to get you to slow down? Those are the things we're looking at because we know we have a problem. We're tracking that. So right now it was April of last year, the vulnerable user law. And that's now given us the ability to track more data. So at the RMV, this is where we track everything. So we are now tracking, is it a cyclist? Okay. Where was this at? Was this in a bike lane? Was this just on the roadway? If it's an interaction with someone with a mobility device, where did it happen? What time? What type of vehicle? And actually starting to track that so we can figure out what safety measures we need to put in. But it is very difficult. But we know that there is a problem, and we are trying to figure out a way to tweak this. But this is much harder than I think anyone intended it to be when putting in these bike lanes. And then as far as connecting them, we're doing a lot of trying to encourage municipalities to better connect them across municipal lines. But that's another really difficult one because the municipalities can do it where they own it. We can do it where we own the land, but if it is a private patch, sometimes that can actually make it to where we are going to have basically it stopping. Then you have to try and figure out how to get to where the next one starts. But I think with the new data that we're actually connecting, I think we'll have a better idea of what sort of designs might work. And then also we're going to work with communities to pilot new designs and just see, okay, so we put in a chicane. Is that bringing down the speeds? Are people having less interactions where the cyclists are putting pedestrians in danger? It's a tough one. It really is. But it's something we have to find a way to fix.
So we have time for one more question, and then I've got one I want to ask you. So one last question.
Hi, Sophia Gallimore from the Watertown Transportation Management Association. So early on in your beginning, Monica, you talked about 2050 and what the TMAs would look like. Can you give us an insight of what you think TMAs, how we will evolve more and more within the communities?
I mean, I think the big thing is you just need more funding. And you need more funding from the state. So right now, as many of you know, we had $25 million in the transportation bond bill a bit ago for the transportation management associations. Right now, we're figuring out how to set up that grant program. We'll be providing it through our regional transit authority kind of pipeline. Basically, it's a similar grant program, but it will be open to just TMAs. So my big thing is we give you the money you need to expand your services. And that's really the vision for us. You know how you need to run them. You know where the gaps are. You just now need the money to do it. And it's also trying to figure out how we get funds to the TMAs for decarbonization. Whether you're looking at electrifying, whether you're looking at hydrogen buses, being able to give you the funds you need in a similar way that we do our regional transit authorities. Because it's basically what you are. You're like a tiny regional transit authority, and we want to make sure you're funded in a very similar way. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the vision, as far as planning for what your services need to look like. We will give data, but we are not in any way going to try and dictate what routes we think that you need to be operating. We just want to help you to be able to operate them.
Okay, I got some rapid fire questions for you.
All right, let's
First
go.
one, googly eyes on the green line. Good idea or bad idea?
Love it.
Okay, the MBTA commuter station, adding one in West Roxbury on the Newton line there over by, is that something that may actually happen?
Potentially.
Potentially, okay. And the rail yard here in Watertown that is a bus yard here that never seems to be utilized for anything. Chance of relinquishing that and making something better there?
Very real possibility.
Excellent. And finally, we've got some state representatives here and a senator here. Don't you want to make a pitch for this, the bond bill, the transportation bond bill? You just mentioned a minute ago.
Honestly, I'm going to make a pitch for the housing bond bill and the economic development bond bill. Those will help us more than anything.
Fantastic. Secretary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All right, thanks to Newton Wellesley Hospital for sponsoring.